Imagine sitting with someone you deeply love, perhaps a parent, a grandparent, or an elderly neighbor who has always been there through the seasons of your life. Someone whose laughter once filled the room, whose advice carried the weight of wisdom, and whose presence gave you a sense of safety and continuity. And now, as the years have passed, you begin to notice things changing. Not all at once, but in small, almost invisible ways. Subtle shifts that could easily be dismissed as ordinary aging, yet deep inside, something whispers that these changes might mean more than they appear. That perhaps time is quietly preparing to turn its final page. And as heartbreaking as it feels, knowing these signs early can give us the chance to respond with love, patience, and presence rather than regret. So today, we dive deep into the 5 subtle signs that may suggest an elderly person is in their final year of life. Signs that are often overlooked, brushed aside, or misunderstood, yet are profoundly important, because they are the body's way of sending quiet signals. Little alarms not shouted but whispered. And if we pay attention, we can not only recognize what's happening, but also ensure comfort, dignity, and emotional connection during the most delicate stage of life. And the first of these signs is withdrawal from social life, something that rarely happens overnight but rather unfolds gradually, like a curtain slowly closing on a stage after a long play, where once your loved one may have looked forward to conversations, laughter at the dinner table, family visits, or even casual small talk with neighbors. They may now begin to retreat inward, not necessarily out of sadness or depression, though that is always a possibility worth considering, but often because the body instinctively begins to conserve its energy, reserving what little vitality remains for the essential functions of survival rather than the social pleasures that once lit their eyes. And this withdrawal might look like missing family gatherings with an excuse of being tired, avoiding phone calls, or preferring to sit quietly by the window instead of joining a lively discussion. And while at first you might feel hurt, thinking perhaps they no longer enjoy your company, in truth, it may simply be their way of slowly stepping back from the world, preparing for rest, and this is where our role becomes crucial. Because even though they may not actively participate, our quiet presence, our willingness to sit beside them in silence, to hold their hand without forcing conversation, can mean more than words as it reassures them that love remains. Even when energy wanes and as we move to the second sign, we notice appetite and weight changes. Another often overlooked detail, because families sometimes attribute this to picky eating, changing taste buds, or common aging issues, but in reality, the body in its final year often begins to reduce its demand for food, no longer requiring the same fuel it once did, and this appears as smaller portions, pushing food around the plate, losing interest in once favorite meals, or sipping only liquids while ignoring solid foods. And what might look like stubbornness is actually a deep biological process where the digestive system begins to slow. The sense of hunger fades and energy needs decline. And with this comes noticeable weight loss, clothes fitting more loosely, the frame appearing frailer, and sometimes families try desperately to encourage eating, offering treats, supplements, or even forceful persuasion. But understanding that this shift is natural allows us to respond differently, offering light, comforting foods, respecting their preferences, and focusing less on calorie intake and more on comfort and dignity. And alongside this, you may observe a third sign, extreme fatigue and the need for more sleep, where once they may have been early risers, tending to the garden or reading the morning newspaper, now they spend more time in bed, napping frequently, or dozing in a chair during the day. And again, this isn't laziness or disinterest in life. It's the body carefully rationing its energy, directing strength toward vital organs rather than external activity. And you may notice that conversations grow shorter, that even a short walk to the kitchen leaves them winded, that they prefer resting quietly instead of engaging in long interactions. And while this can be difficult for family members who want to share meaningful time, it is important to remember that presence doesn't always require words or activity. Sometimes the greatest gift you can offer is simply being there, quietly holding their hand while they rest, reading softly beside them, or playing their favorite music while they drift into sleep. Because in these final stages, love often speaks most powerfully in silence. And then comes the fourth sign. Changes in breathing and voice, something that often startles families because it feels sudden. But in truth, it is part of the gradual process. As muscles weaken and lung capacity decreases, you may hear shallower breaths, longer pauses, or even subtle changes in the rhythm of breathing, known medically as Cheney-Stokes patterns. Though to the untrained ear it may simply sound like irregular breathing, and the voice too may shift, once strong and commanding but now softer, raspy, weaker, sometimes fading into whispers, making it harder for them to communicate. And while this can create fear in loved ones who struggle to adjust to the fragility of sound, it is another natural sign of transition. And the kindest response is not to push them to speak more, but to listen more carefully, to lean in closer, to treasure every soft-spoken word as a jewel, and even to communicate through touch, eye contact, or simple gestures when words become scarce, because communication is far deeper than language. And finally, we arrive at the fifth sign, subtle changes in awareness and memory, which can be the most emotionally challenging to witness, as your loved one may drift in and out of alertness, lose track of time, forget recent events, or seem lost in memories from decades ago, sometimes even speaking as if conversing with loved ones who have already passed away. And while this may seem unsettling, for them it can be a source of comfort, as the mind begins to untether from the physical world, preparing for transition. And in these moments, families often wonder, should we correct them? Should we bring them back to reality? But often the gentlest approach is simply to join them in their world, to listen with patience, to nod with understanding, and to treasure the glimpses into the landscapes of their memory. Because these final conversations, however fragmented, carry profound emotional weight, and through them, they may be teaching us, reassuring us, or simply finding peace. And when all these signs, withdrawal, appetite change, fatigue, breathing shifts, and awareness changes begin to appear together, they often signal that time may be shorter than we think, not measured in decades or even years, but perhaps in months, weeks, or days. And while these signs may fill us with sorrow, they are also invitations, gentle reminders that the most precious gift we can give in the final year is not medical intervention alone, but presence, compassion, and love. And this is where our role as children, grandchildren, friends, or caregivers becomes sacred. For the end of life is not merely about death. It is about honoring life, about creating final moments filled with dignity, about whispering, "I'm here," when words fail, and holding steady when the body falters. And so when you see these signs, don't look away, don't dismiss them, and don't retreat into fear. But instead lean in, offer your love, your ear, your hand, and your heart, because one day, when the chair by the window sits empty, when the familiar voice grows silent, what remains are not the fears of death, but the memories of love shared, presence given, and dignity preserved. And that is the true measure of life, not how long it lasted, but how deeply it was lived, how gracefully it was ended, and how beautifully it is remembered. So let us carry this awareness not as a burden, but as a gift, to cherish our elders while we have them, to notice the subtle whispers of their final year, and to respond not with panic, but with compassion. For in the end, death is not an end at all, but a passage, and love is the light that carries us all the way through.